Good afternoon, students. Remaining topic of the brain and cranial nerve: cerebellum, diencephalon, cerebrum, and the cranial nerves. First, we will see cerebellum. Cerebellum is the major structure of brain located near brainstem, and it has two main parts: cerebellar cortex, cerebellar nuclei. It is called a mini brain, and cerebellum plays an important role in coordination, vision, and the balance, learning, posture. Then next topic is the diencephalon. It is a division of the forebrain. Brain is divided into three parts: midbrain, forebrain, and the hindbrain. So it is a division of a forebrain, consists of thalamus, hypothalamus, and the epithalamus, and it attaches optic nerve to the diencephalon, and it control eye movement and the hearing. Then cerebrum. Cerebrum is a large part of the brain made up of two cerebral hemisphere divided into frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. Cerebral cortex and cerebral hemisphere are the part of the cerebrum and function as the sensory processing, olfaction, and the learning memory are the main functions. Then cranial nerves are a set of 12 paired nerve: olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, spinal, accessory, and the hypoglossal. Then we will see in detail about the cerebellum. Cerebellum is the major structure of the brain. Hindbrain means backside of the brain, that is located near the brainstem. Cerebellum is located near the brainstem. This part of the brain is responsible for coordinating voluntary movement. Which voluntary movement we are doing? This is because of the cerebellum. It is also responsible for a number of functions including motor skills such as balance, coordination, and posture. Location of the cerebellum is the largest structure of the hindbrain and can be found in the back portion of the skull below the temporal and occipital lobe. These lobes, occipital and the temporal, and below this we can see below the temporal and occipital lobes and behind the brainstem. The cerebellum consists of a cortex. Cerebellum also, just like brain covered by the skull, cerebellum consists of a cortex and covering white matter as well as ventricle filled with fluid. It is also divided into two hemispheres. Cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres like the cerebellum, the cerebellar cortex, and the cerebellar nuclei. Cerebellar cortex, a layer containing folded tissue containing most of the cerebellum's neuron, and cerebellar nucleus, the innermost part of the cerebellum, consists containing nerve cells that communicating information from the cerebellum. Functions: the cerebellum receives information from the other region of the brain and nervous system including the brainstem, spinal cord, and the cerebrum. Cerebellum receives information from the spinal cord, brainstem, and cerebrum. The incoming information is then used by the cerebellum to coordinate and control voluntary movements. The cerebellum is like a mini brain. Cerebellum is called a mini brain when it comes to movement and plays an important role in coordination, posture, and balance, as well as in speech and a number of important mental processes. There are several key functions of the cerebellum, including movement, mental function, vision, balance, posture, and the motor learning. This is all about the cerebellum. Cerebellum is called a mini brain. Then diencephalon. Diencephalon is a division of the forebrain. Cerebellum is the division of the hindbrain, and diencephalon is the division of the forebrain and is situated between the telencephalon and the midbrain. It consists of structures that are on either side of the third ventricle, including the thalamus and the hypothalamus, the epithalamus and the subthalamus. The diencephalon is one of the main vesicles of the brain formed during embryogenesis. During the third week of development, a neural tube is created from the ectoderm. Ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm are the layers of the embryology. one of the three primary germ layer. Structure of the diencephalon. Diencephalon consists of following structure: thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, stria medullaris, thalami, posterior commissure, spinal body, and the subthalamus. Attachment of the diencephalon. The optic nerve attaches to the diencephalon. The optic nerve is a sensory nerve responsible for vision. It runs from the eye through the optic canal in the skull and attaches to the diencephalon. The retina itself is derived from the optic cup, a part of the embryo diencephalon. Function: the diencephalon is the region of the embryonic vertebrate neural tube that gives rise to anterior forebrain structure, including the thalamus, hypothalamus, posterior portion of the pituitary gland, and the pineal gland. The diencephalon encloses a cavity called third ventricle. The thalamus serves as relay center for sensory and motor impulses between the spinal cord and medulla oblongata and the cerebrum. It recognizes sensory impulses of heat, cold, pain, pressure, etc. The floor of the third ventricle is called the hypothalamus. It has control center for the eye movement and the hearing responses. Then seventh topic is the cerebrum. Cerebrum is the large part of the brain made up of two cerebral hemisphere, cerebral cortex and the cerebral hemisphere. Sensory function as a sensory processing, olfaction, learning and memory. Then we will see in detail about the cerebrum. The cerebrum or telencephalon is a large part of the brain. Cerebellum is the mini part of the brain. Cerebrum is the large part of the brain, containing the cerebral cortex as well as subcortical structures including hippocampus, basal ganglia and olfactory bulb. In the human brain, the cerebrum is the uppermost region of the central nervous system. The cerebrum is also divided into approximately symmetric left and right cerebral hemispheres. With the assistance of the cerebellum controls all voluntary action in the human body. Structure of the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. Depending upon the position of the animal, it lies either in front or on top of the brainstem. The cerebrum is made up of two cerebral hemispheres and their cortices and the underlying regions of white matter. Its subcortical structure include the hippocampus, basal ganglia and the olfactory bulb. The cerebrum consists of two C-shaped cerebral hemispheres separated from each other by deep fissure called a longitudinal fissure. The outer layer of the grey matter of the cerebrum is found only in mammals. In larger mammals including humans, the surface of the cerebral cortex folds to create gyri and sulci. Gyri and sulci are present in the cerebral cortex, which increases the surface area, and because of this gyri and sulci, surface area of the cerebral cortex increases. The cerebral cortex is generally classified into four lobes. These are lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital and the temporal lobes. The lobes are classified on their overlying neurocranial bones. Then cerebral hemisphere. The cerebrum is divided by the medial longitudinal fissure into two cerebral hemispheres, the right and the left. The cerebrum is contralaterally organized, that is, right hemisphere control and processes signal from the left side of the body, while the left hemisphere controls and processes signal from the right side of the body. Means right side control left and left side control right side of the body. And functions of the cerebrum is sensory processing. The primary sensory area of the cerebral cortex receive and process visual, auditory, somatosensory, gustatory and olfactory information. Then olfaction. Olfaction means sense of smell. We learn in last lecture of the sensory sense of sensory nerves. Olfaction. The olfactory bulb responsible for the sense of smell take up a large area of the cerebrum in most of the vertebrate. Then third function is the language and the communication. Speech and language are mainly attributed to part of cerebral cortex. Learning and memory. Memory formation, excited region of the medial temporal brain. Cerebrum This is all about the cerebrum, large part of the brain made up of two cerebral hemispheres, cerebral cortex and the cerebral hemisphere. Then we will learn about the cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are the set of 12 paired nerves. These are the names of the nerves: olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, spinal, accessory and the hypoglossal. These are the 12 paired nerves. Then we will see detail about the cranial nerves. The cranial nerve are set of 12 paired nerves that arise directly from the brain. The first two nerves, olfactory and optic. These olfactory and optic arise from the cerebrum. Olfactory and optic arise from the cerebrum, whereas the remaining 10 emerge from the brainstem. Olfactory, optic from the cerebrum, and all these are from the brainstem. The names of the cranial nerve relate to their function. Olfactory related to the smell, optic related to the eyes, just like all are related to them according to their function. Origin of the cranial nerves. There are 12 cranial nerves in total. The olfactory nerve and optic nerve originate from cerebrum. Cranial nerve arise from the brainstem, and all remaining cranial nerve arise from the brainstem. They can arise from a specific part of the brainstem. Brainstem is contain midbrain, pons and the medulla. From midbrain, trochlear nerve comes from the posterior side of the midbrain. From midbrain, pontine junction, oculomotor, and from pons, trigeminal nerve comes. Pontine medulla junction, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear are come. From medulla oblongata, posterior to the optic, glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, anterior to the optic, hypoglossal. Then modalities of these nerves. Simplistically, each cranial nerve can be described as being sensory, motor or both. These nerves are both motor or sensory. They can more specifically transmit 7 types of information. These all nerves transmit 7 types of information. Sensory modalities means afferent nerves. There are 4 modalities: general somatic sensory, general visceral sensory, special somatic sensory and special visceral sensory. Then general somatic sensory means general sensation from skin. Nerve carry information from the skin. The general visceral sensory means general sensation from viscera. Viscera means any organ like abdomen, stomach, just like visceral organs. Special stomach somatic senses derived from the ectoderm, means sight, sound and balance. Then special visceral sensory means senses derived from the endoderm, example taste, smell. And then remaining 3 modalities are the motor modalities, means efferent modalities. General somatic motor means skeletal muscle. General visceral motor means smooth muscle of gut and autonomic motor. Then special visceral motor means muscle derived from the pharyngeal arches. Then summary of the cranial nerve name. There are 12 nerves. Name is the olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, spinal, accessory, hypoglossal. This is all about the 10th chapter, anatomy 10th chapter, brain and cranial nerves. Thank you.